When Hamas attacked Israel, all our sympathies were with Israel. Sri Lanka, which had always supported Palestine, said no, this has to be condemned. So did many others. Then Israel, it took a day or two because I think firstly before the survival of Israel was the survival of Netanyahu government. So, but by the time he got his act together, it was a question of going into Gaza. And the bombing of Gaza began. So there have been many questions. There were those who felt, most probably in most of the Middle East, other Muslim countries, that Israel should be condemned. And others said, no, Israel has suffered, let's see what this means. So the bombing is over now. In the meantime, Secretary of State Blinken went in there. America has announced its stand. Now we find that Israel has announced over 1 million people in Gaza, from North Gaza, has to move to the south. Now this in turn has drawn condemnations, not only from the UN, from the African countries, and even from some of the European countries. So what happens next? If the people of Gaza has been asked to move out, it means Israel will move in. Why had the people of Gaza been moved out? Why was Gaza bombed? I mean, done with a purpose. I don't think Israel just went on a rampage. They thought that bombing Gaza, the buildings, bringing them down, was the first stage of cleaning out the tunnels in which Hamas is hiding. So if they go in and find Hamas and they fight, as one issue. What happens if they go in and find that the Hamas is missing? I used to always think, last few days, why did Hamas do this? A brutal murder. I mean, it's a massacre. It's something more than that. There was a reaction. They wanted a reaction. What is the reaction Hamas wanted? They would have wanted Israel to come into Gaza. Otherwise, you would just go and spoil your reputation by shooting up innocent civilians who are enjoying themselves. So what is the strategy? After all, Hamas can't win in outright battle with Israel. So this is the next stage that we have to look into. The picture looks pretty bleak. If you go in there, you create another issue in the whole of Middle East, into the whole of the Muslim world, and thereafter. Middle East means it will be unstable, the prices will be up, oil prices, others will all be affected. Within the Middle East, many governments may not be safe. What happened to those who took part in the Abrahamic Accords? I think it's a good thing, but nevertheless, it's become a bad issue now. How do you handle it? You go down all the way down to Indonesia on this side, all the way down to Central Africa on the other side, into countries like Zanzibar, small but important islands. How do you control it? What happens? And there are countries like us with significant Muslim populations. All those countries, if the governments have to go with the popular sympathy. What I'm surprised is the amount of support that Palestine is getting in places like Europe and America, where the campuses are divided. Now there's a big difference between 9/11 and this. Everyone sympathized with Israel at the beginning. But will that be there next week? Everyone sympathized with USA at 9/11. Whatever support they lost was a year or two after. So how are you going to, what will be the position in our part of the world? In the Indian Ocean, that will be the worst affected. We've got to think of it. What do governments do? There are limited options available for them, especially if the Hamas is not found or destroyed in Gaza. If you go in and destroy the Hamas, catch the leaders, there may be something to be said. But do you think they did this to be caught? That's the point. And more than that, the global geopolitics is what I am concerned of. How are we going to do this? Can US manage Ukraine, Taiwan and the Middle East? Gaza, I don't think. If you are going to have 2 aircraft carrier groups in the Mediterranean, that's serious. Can you manage it? It's going to be difficult because many issues are going to rise. The present administration went back on a lot of issues implemented by President Clinton, President Bush, the Washington Consensus. President Bush has moved to Asia, followed by President Obama, and in its own way, though he was eccentric, President Trump. Now, in my view, I may be wrong, you dismantle that. That order has been dismantled. Firstly, China, taken on China. You've taken on Russia. Can you run this with the new Quad and UK? In EU, there has been undermining of Germany and France. When US has gone in with the Eastern Europeans. What can Eastern European do when you are focused on Israel? So there can be a big change, a power balance which is taking place. And unfortunately, in the midst of this, the Congress can't decide who the speaker is going to be. So this is what we are. If these actors, then the others will go on their own. US, I won't say it's primus inter pares, is not first among equals, is first among unequals. So you got to, are you going to maintain that position or not? Because if these attacks take place, and especially you don't find the Hamas leaders, and I'm of the view that Hamas should be punished. I'm not one who says it shouldn't be. The Hamas should, don't find the leaders. What is the consequence for the global economy, for the geopolitics? I mean, it's going to change. It's no longer a unipolar world, it's not a bipolar world. You need so many other factors. You can't ignore Asia. In the Indian Ocean, we count. So how are you going to manage? You take the Quad. For instance, India has good relations with the Middle East and with Russia. I don't think Japan will put its supply of fuel at peril. So these are all issues that everyone is talking. Fortunately, at the moment, everyone is talking to each other. And there are a lot of backstage diplomacy that's going on. But what will happen once the Israeli army moves into Gaza, and especially if you don't find the Hamas leadership, is the $64 trillion question. I can't tell you what it is. But this can change the world, global order. It can bring in other players. Can the US then manage this order alone? At least the minimum is they've got to talk to everyone, keep it going. But then countries like China, Russia and all are going to ask, what is Israel doing in Gaza? Today the relationships are so strained that no one is going to help each other. When the attack took place, 9/11, the whole world rushed to the help of the US. I don't see that now. Each one is looking at their own interests and how they are going to survive. So you can find that global order which has been functioning in different ways for the last 50, 60 years as bipolar or unipolar, no longer responding. I think the first act is to ensure that the whole global geopolitical system can work together. I am surprised at some of the reactions that are taking place in different parts of the world. But those extreme reactions should not be allowed to hold sway, whether it's among the Islamic world or among the Israelis and the Jews or among the West. I was reading an interview of a speech by former President Trump. I am not an admirer of his, but who said that the Hezbollah was smart and people criticized for him. But obviously it was a smart move what they made. And he said Netanyahu must be responsible for the failure in intelligence. And they criticized him again. But those are frank, basically, this is what all of us think. Not that we support Hamas or what they did or Hezbollah. I don't support any of them. But firstly, we must all outside Israel and the Gaza come to a senses. Then where do we go from here? Okay, I've said all this. I don't think Gaza and US will get together, Israel can get together. I don't think you can even have a two-state solution. So what do you have? You have Israel that's functioning, Gaza that's destroyed, you have Palestine that is half functioning, and you have Lebanon that's also half functioning. At least got to take 4 states into. If you are going to look for a solution, establish 4 states, not for 2. And you got to think of Syria beyond that. So I think all I can say is it's time we started thinking anew. Going along the old grooves will not help us, whichever way the events turn out in the next few days.